Hey y'all, we're going to be doing some fun spring flowers today. Now if you want, you could start with a pencil and that way you have the freedom and the flexibility to erase and change things if you would like. However, for time's sake, and also just because I'm going to embrace any accidents that I have and try to make them into happy accidents, I'm going to be starting with the Sharpie marker. The nice thing about starting with the Sharpie marker is also I'm going to be kind of going ahead and creating my own coloring sheet with the Sharpie marker because I'll have those nice thick outlines already. Now if there's anything in here that you see that you want to change up or do differently than me, that is absolutely fine. I'm going to be starting somewhere in this lower left corner-ish area, and I'm actually going to start with what looks like kind of a heart. But I'm not doing that sharp little point in the center of the heart. I'm kind of letting it flow. It almost looks like the edge of a clover maybe. I'm going to repeat that same shape right here. Now, although we're not trying to go for radial symmetry where everything's the same all the way around, one thing you can do is if it's easier on you to turn your paper and kind of do the same shape from the same angle over and over, that's great. So you can see now I've got those 4 little heart-shaped leaves coming out. I am going to very gently do some little curved lines coming out from the center. Now you can make your lines a little wibbly wobbly and that would be fine. So if you're shaking a little bit or you want to shake a little bit, it almost make it a little bit more realistic. So a little line out from the center and then a little circle on the end. Now that's looking pretty cool, but I love doing repetition. So I'm going to come outside of each of those little heart type shapes, and I'm going to do an extra little layer, leaving a little space in between my new layer and that original little heart shape. The nice thing, if you're doing this with the Sharpie and you mess up, you can always go ahead and fill parts in, because some parts filled in with the solid black do look really nice. Now some people like to go ahead and do a stem down. If you want to go ahead and do that, you could, but I'm actually going to hop over and do some more flowers before I do the stems going down. This next one, I'm going to do kind of a loose organic type shape. It's not a perfect circle and it's not a perfect oval. If yours is a little bit more irregular, that is absolutely fine. Now, kind of borrowing from this little line with the little circle on the end from right here, I'm going to do some curved lines going up from the bottom. And again, if you want to make these a little shaky, it actually kind of looks cool. And little circles in the end. Even though I'm speeding this up in parts, I'm going really slow, so you really want to take your time, pause the video as you need. Now I could leave the shape as is, or once again, I could go ahead and go around the outside edge and just make an extra little layer. Now I had so much fun with that. I think I'm going to do something similar to that. Maybe just change up the first shape a little bit. So maybe I'll go ahead and do a bigger shape that almost looks like the shape of a tulip. So you can see it's kind of like a big U with a straight-ish line up top. I say straight-ish because in nature you don't see many perfectly straight lines. Once again, I'm coming up from the bottom with those little slightly curved lines going up the shape. And little circles at the top. Whoop. If you wanted to change up that shape, you could. I might have some fun just to change it up a little bit, put a little dot in the center of each of these, and of course, you don't have to do that. Now I'm going to come up here and I'm going to start with kind of an elongated raindrop type shape. And I'm going to be doing these all the way around. So once again, if it's easier for you to turn that paper while you go around with that, you certainly can. Now I'm going to put a little loop or a little second raindrop in the center of each of my bigger raindrops. Whoop. And just for fun, since I like doing those little layers going out, I'm going to add an extra little curve shape, kind of like a U or a C shape on the outside edge of each of these. Now, I love that this naturally kind of created a darker shadow or darker center space in that. I think that looks really cool. Now, because I love pattern and I love lines, I'm going to go around with the tippy tip of my Sharpie and carefully add in some little lines for stripes going around. You don't have to do it. Now I'm going to do another kind of radial moving around flower. This time I am going to work with kind of a curved triangle shape. So it's almost a cross between our original little heart-shaped leaves and our little raindrop type shapes. Now in the center right here, I might do a little heart, and you can think of them as hearts or just a cool little pattern in the center. It's up to you. And of course, you certainly don't have to do them either. Now it looks good like that, but ooh, I think I might go around with an extra little layer because you know how I feel about those. And on the edges of these, I might add a couple more little petals coming out. Think of them like little U's or little W's. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be even. Oh, should we do it? Should we add an extra layer to those? Oh, why not? Let's see how it looks. When you're a drawer and a doodler, you kind of have your own thing, or you discover your own thing. Mine is repeated patterns and layers and stripes. I love all of those elements. And I also love adding dots. That doesn't mean you have to. That's just kind of my jam. I'm feeling like some little upward raindrops right here. So I am going to kind of curve my line and do an upward facing raindrop like that. It almost looks like paisley, if you know what paisley is. So I'm going to kind of repeat that same type shape over and over. I might add some variety in the sizes of them. Now I think that looks good right there, but ooh, I think it wants one more little one over there kind of going down. Whoop. I like that. Little lines coming down. Now I want to keep this video pretty simple, but one thing I might do if I were doing this on my own, I would actually at this time grab an artist pen and I would do some of my detailing in lines with the artist pen so that I had a variety of weights of the lines. When I say weights of the lines, it's kind of the thickness of the lines. So you can imagine if I had a pen going in there, it would look really nice to have a variety in that line. Move up here. Now we haven't really started off any flowers with a circle in the center, so I think I'm going to do that right here. And then I'm going to do little petals. They're kind of like rounded off rectangles or squares. And again, I'm going to go all the way around. Now notice I had to make that little petal a little bit thicker right there just because it's not all the way even, but I still think it looks really cool. So I'm going to do an extra little layer in the center. Now this time I'm doing a couple more little layers and lines going out, but I'm adding 2 at a time going off of each little petal. And I think that looks pretty cool. It makes it a little bit more fluid when you have a couple of shapes going out at the same time and I'm leaving my Sharpie down on the paper. I actually want to make this flower go all the way off the page, so I'm going to extend these petals out. That's another thing I love doing. I love kind of making some things go off the page as if you're not trying to fit everything on the page. Just let it go where it wants to go. And in fact, I'm looking back over here, and while I like this one a lot as is, I'm going to do that same thing over here. I'm going to add one more layer. Now you can watch what I'm doing and look at it and say, ooh, I don't like that. I definitely don't want to do that to mine. Or you might look at it and say, ooh, that was a good idea. That kind of added a lot to it. Now I feel like some of my flowers want to grow a little bit, so I am going to just keep kind of increasing their size. You might look at yours and say, I don't want to make mine any bigger, and you certainly don't have to. I'm going all the way around this one and just adding some little tiny baby petals around. Now the nice thing, artists, is there is no right or wrong to what I'm doing right now. You can just add to yours as you see fit. Do the patterns and the designs and repetitions that make you happy. So you can see, since I've increased the size of my flowers, I've had to kind of make some overlapping choices right here. So just make sure that you're mindful of that. If you're making your flowers go in front or behind, just make sure you're not crisscrossing those lines. I'm going to do a little organic shaped blob in here. And I'm going to do kind of a little wavy line going around, and it's going to kind of close up into almost looks like a cracked egg shape. Because I like my layers, I'm going around it one more time. And I'm going to have this one going behind that first one. Don't really have a choice since I'm going in Sharpie actually. And then taking my time, I am going to start to move out with some lines from the center. These don't need to be perfect, and artists, one thing you'll notice is some of your lines kind of come together and merge. You're almost going to create a natural shadow, which can be really, really cool. And if your lines in this part get shaky, I think it actually looks even cooler. In fact, when I used to do some of these flowers, I would let my daughter, who was 5 at the time, go ahead and do some of the lines because she did kind of shaky lines and it looked so cool. So you can see just by doing those lines out from the center, I automatically create a shadow. How cool is that? Now I could bump up that shadow even more in a little bit, and I'll show you how to do that. Now, stems going down, and I'm going to leave myself, no matter how I do my stems, I'm going to leave myself a little space, and I'll show you why in just a minute. But I want to keep my stems pretty simple, so a slight curve of your lines going down is absolutely fine, but you don't want to make them too crazy. Or I mean, I guess you could make them crazy if you want, but I kind of like to keep mine simple because I'm going to do some flair with my little leaves going on the stems. And don't forget, for every stem you start up there, you need to continue down there so you don't have a floating chopped off flower. Now let's play with some decorations on our little stems. So the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little line out, and then I'm just going to kind of wrap it into a little circle-ish, ovalish type shape at the end. Go out and kind of curve it around. It's almost like I'm starting a question mark off of each one, but then I'm turning that question mark into a little closed shape. This one, I'm going to kind of do a similar shape to this little flower right here, but I'm going to kind of curve it the other way. So it's almost like a little upside down raindrop once again. And of course I'm being mindful and respecting the other shapes that were there first, and I'm going behind them. I'm going to do more of a traditional leaf type shape off of this one. And you'll notice, artists, I'm kind of staggering my shapes. You don't have to stagger your shapes if you don't want to. And you certainly don't have to do this many shapes coming down off of your stems either. I'm going to add a line in the middle just because. I noticed I didn't have any of these little leaves up here, so I went ahead and did that, and I might do one more kind of sticking out right there. I think that looks kind of fun, just having those floating circles right there, but if you want to attach them, you certainly could. Boop. In fact, I like that a lot, so I'm going to do some bigger circles off of this one. Might even do a dot in the center, make them look like eyes again to kind of match the little eyes that are in the middle of that other flower. Boop. There's a little raindrop type shape, but this time I'm kind of keeping it closer. Now maybe this stem's not going to have anything coming off of it. It's just going to be a regular stem. And in this stem, I'm going to do, it looks like a figure 8. Right there, so you can see how I did that figure 8 off of there. So it's like a sideways faced number 8. And of course, if it helps for you to turn your paper and do it like that, you certainly may. So you can see how that's almost a perfect number 8. Now I left a little space right here for my little surprise. I'm doing a little gnome house right there. And of course that is totally optional, but I think it's fun to have kind of that little element of surprise in there. Now, if you have done yours with pencil or even a really thin pen, you might want to take the time to go over your lines with Sharpie. But since I've already done my lines with Sharpie, I'm actually ready to add color. And of course, color is optional because you can see this actually looks beautiful without color. Another idea is to stop right here and you can give this to someone else, maybe a parent or a friend or a little sibling, for them to use as a coloring sheet, because most people love coloring and they find it very relaxing and therapeutic. But I am going to just go ahead and go over some coloring with you. Now, anything works. I've got some colored pencils. I've got some crayons. I also have a little set of watercolors that you can get from any store. So I'm just going to do a little bit of everything just to kind of show you some options. Now, I said I would show you some extra shading options right here. Ooh, let me go with my kind of darker green. Now, you can add great value with colored pencils just by pressing down and lifting up. So in the center right here, let me zoom in a tiny bit. With my colored pencil, I'm going to get kind of a darker value. And then if I lighten up on that pressure coming out, you can see it's going to kind of fade out. Now, of course, I already have that great value in there just by my Sharpie lines merging together by themselves. Another great material to use on these, if you have them, is watercolor pencils. So if I had watercolor pencils, and these are just basic color pencils, what I'm doing now, I could actually hit with a paintbrush and pull that color out with my water, and it would look really, really cool. Watercolor pencils you can usually get at Target. You can certainly get it at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or order them online. And usually they're pretty inexpensive, but they're a whole lot of fun. Now I'm taking the time and the care to really fill in all the way and do my best coloring. We call that craftsmanship. So just being very neat and intentional with your coloring, filling in all the spaces on the paper. Now I'm going to grab my crayon and I'm just going to do kind of the same type thing with my crayon. I'm going to actually press down a little bit harder where I want it to look darker and kind of lift up on that crayon. And so I'm almost getting some value out of that crayon. So again, where I want it to be darker, kind of towards the bottom of each of those petals, I'm pressing down a little bit harder with that crayon. Now, although I break crayons a lot, you ideally want to not break the crayon, so you don't want to press down so hard that you break the crayon, especially if you are sharing crayons with friends or siblings right now. I'm just going to keep it with my orange just for fun, and I'm actually going to loosen up my coloring just a bit around the edge, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute. So we talked about craftsmanship and kind of filling in all the space on your paper and the area that you're coloring so you don't have big holes in it. But right here where I'm loosening up with my crayon, I am actually going to leave some holes in there. I might even move up here and start adding some little dots. Now once again, I'm pressing down with decent pressure with my crayon. So you don't have to just keep your pattern making to the original drawing. You can add it when you add color. Now just for fun, I'm gonna get out my watercolors. And of course, if you don't have your watercolors or don't have any available, you just keep yours like that. This is absolutely fine. But I do want to just remind you about a Crayon Resist. Very gently, I'm just activating that red paint. And I want to use the tippy tip of my paintbrush, paint very lightly, but I also want to make sure that I have a decent amount of water in here. So notice I'm not digging right now. I'm using just the tippy tip of my paintbrush. This is a paintbrush, not a shovel. Oh, and look at that. I splattered some paint around. That actually, I think that would look kind of cool. Look. If you are doing this at home, you might not want to splatter paint everywhere, or ask a parent if it's okay if you splatter paint in an area. But since I'd already splattered some red dots, I just went with it and did a happy accident. Now, with my juicy paintbrush, I'm going to go ahead and paint on top. And look at that. That crayon is pushing that paint off, saying, get off of me, because that crayon and that paint do not like each other. And that is what we call a crayon resist. It's that wax in that crayon or that oil resisting and pushing the water off. And it works to our benefit in this technique. In fact, I love that so much. I think I'm going to go through here and I'm going to create some more patterns with my crayon. Remember, I'm pressing down with decent pressure, but I'm not pressing so hard that I break the crayon. And of course, if you do accidentally break a crayon, you can still use crayon pieces. It's not the end of the world. So I'm switching colors, so I'm just kind of wringing out that paintbrush and sliding it. Again, decent amount of water, using the tippy tip of my paintbrush. And of course, that crayon is pushing that paint off, saying, get off of me. Now, if your paint gets too thick in an area, of course, this doesn't look bad, but you can always borrow paint and use paint from one area of your paper on a different area. The paper that I'm using right now is a kind of a heavier weight sulfite drawing paper from Dick Blick. Use mixed media paper, watercolor paper, sometimes even a thicker construction paper. If you're using paint though, it is ideal not to use a printer paper, although the paint will still go on it. It's just going to kind of crinkle up a little bit. Now I'm grabbing that yellow. So you can see that when I painted that yellow, I touched the area where the green paint was still wet and it kind of ran and blended together. And that happens when you paint wet by wet and they touch each other, the colors kind of blend and run together. I actually wanted that to happen because I think it looks really cool. But if you don't want your colors to run and blend together, if you are painting, then what you'll want to do is just kind of dance around your paper and paint different sections at a time. All right, artists, I'm going to stop my demonstration right here, but if you wanted to continue to add more and more color to yours, you certainly can. I think it does look nice to keep some little pops of white in there, but at the same time, it might look really cool also to fill in that background with a background color. If you were going to do that and you had wet paint on there, I would encourage you to let everything dry before you added in a background color. And of course, if you want to add a background color, I would keep everything in your background pretty simple because you already have a lot going on right here and you don't want to take away from the beautiful artwork that you've already done. Thanks so much for watching, guys.